Hello and welcome back to the Blender course videos. This is video number 2 and I'll be explaining how to use the T toolbar and how to do some basic stuff with Blender. Now, I didn't remember last time to tell you about your mouse. When you have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can use the wheel to go up and down or zoom in and zoom out, and you can press the wheel to rotate your scene or pan around your scene. You can see how it's panning around the center of the world, which is at the cross point of these two axes, the x-axis and the y-axis, and the z-axis, which is not shown. Uh, this is the default cube, and if you don't like your default cube, you can delete your default cube and then go to your file menu and say defaults save startup file, and you overwrite that with your default the default file with yours. And now if you go and file a new general, you will get a new file that doesn't have anything in it except the camera and the lamp. If you don't like these, you can take them off as well. But I usually like to work with this, so I can just go and add with the Shift A. I can add any type of object I want to start working with. And the word mesh merely means any object that consists of vertices, edges, and faces. You have a plane, a cube, a circle, a UV sphere, an aquasphere, and these different types of objects are all useful for in different places. Curves are not meshes. They are mathematical representations of curves, and they are useful in some locations, but most of the time you will be wanting to work with meshes. The same applies to surfaces, not used that much. Metaballs, yeah, these are also mathematical beings. They are not uh, meshes, so to speak, and they are not as easy to use as meshes. Text is, of course, very important. Text remains a text object until you convert it into a mesh. And for the most part, you don't need to convert it into a mesh, but if you want to 3D print it, for example, then you have to make it into a mesh. You can also import volumes from other programs, but this is not used that much. A grease pencil is a way of drawing onto your scene and then converting that stroke of the grease pencil into a mesh. I haven't used that much. Armature means bones inside your mesh. For example, if you 3D scanned yourself and you imported that object file into Blender with the ultimate goal of having a game asset that you could move like a human being, you would have to import the object into Blender, then use the armature command to insert bones inside your object, and then export the whole thing with the bones into Unity, for example, and then you could actually play with your own homemade game asset. Lattices are not used that much either. They are just like a large plane, but an empty is actually important. An empty looks like this, and an empty is a point in space. You can move it like it was a mesh. You can scale it like it was a mesh, but it still only is that orange point in the center of the object. But the good thing um, with the empties is that you can snap your cursor to an empty, and you can add more empties, and you can snap your cursor to the selected empty. And that means that if you know of some locations inside your scene that you have to remember where they are, you can snap an empty object into that location. And then you can use that to go back there and snap something else to the important location. Yeah, there are other types of empties. And all of these are, as you can see here on the right hand side, you can see we have an empty, we have another empty, and yet another empty. But all of these are still just points in space and nothing else. I will delete all of those because I don't need them right now. I can also import an image for use as a reference or use as a background or use as a mesh plane. I can create a light, a point light, a sunlight spot or area, or I have no idea what the light probe is. But if you need more cameras, you can get them from here. And if you need to do physics, this is where you can insert a force field like a wind or a magnetic field and many other types of interesting stuff. And you can create a collection. With the collection, if you look at your scene, currently in the scene, in this only collection that we have in here, we only have a camera and a light. But as soon as I add a cube, it will appear there as a cube. And note how an object appears wherever the cursor happens to be. If I place my cursor over there and then add a sphere, the origin of the new object will appear where the cursor happens to be. Similarly, if I go to the cube and I go to one of the vertices, snap the cursor to the selected vertex, go into object mode, and then add another sphere, it will appear where my cursor happened to be, which was the corner of the cube. So bear in mind that any object will always appear wherever the cursor happens to be, and the origin of the object will be right there where the cursor is. Right, let's have a look at the tool shelves. The T tool shelf is on the left-hand side, and the N tool shelf is on the right-hand side, and they have different purposes. The left-hand side toolbar or tool shelf, it's not a bar, has these buttons whenever you are in object mode. And as you might recall from the previous video, object mode is where all the operations like move and rotate and scale apply to the whole environment, the whole mesh. But if you are in edit mode and you select some area, then the operations will only apply to those regions that are selected. And if I scale, it's going to scale only that part, and if I move, it's going to move only that part. So that is the difference between object mode and edit mode, and the quick key for object and edit is the tab key, and up here you have a option to select your mode if you want to do it by hand. Now, in object mode, we only have these buttons here. The first one is select, and left clicking will select any object that you point to. And if you press long on that, you can get a select box or a select circle or a select lasso. Now, the box is the default anyway. If you are in object mode and you just drag a box in here, you get that. And if you press C, you will get a selection tool, a circle, and now I'm using my mouse to scroll the size of this selection tool. I can make it about that size, and I can select the whole ball, or I can make it, if I am in edit mode, let me go into edit mode and not select anything. And now I am going to add a circle selection in here. I only get the vertices that are within the circle that I'm selecting. So that is the difference between the box and the circle. And the lasso tool, which I don't use that much, let's see if it has a quick key. Yeah, it's like W is the selection tool for that. But if I go into lasso mode, I can draw an area and it will select those vertices that lie within my selection. You also need to understand at this point that this is where you select your vertices, 1, 2, 3. And if I press down on the Shift key, I can select multiple vertices like so. Or if I select the edge mode, I can select edges. That is now a selection. Or if I go into face select mode, I can select faces. With the Shift key down, I can select for faces, and I can now do the same extrusion as I did for the other one. So it all depends on what you need to do. If you want to be very precise, then you need to select the vertices. And if you need to have the edges, you can take those 4 edges and then the other edges as well. But the fastest way to do this is to go into face select mode and select the faces. So it all depends on what you need to do. Then the next one is the cursor. This is where you can drop the cursor wherever you like. And as you can see, understanding where it falls is actually not that easy because we are looking at our scene in the 3D view. If you want to be sure where your cursor is going to fall, you either go here or click on your numpad 7 and view your scene from the top. Then I can try to place it here, and now it's totally on top of the origin of the world, but it is still up in the air. So I go into the X view, and then I go here where I can see the Z axis and the X and the Y axis. Click on that, and now we should be nicely on the center there. And if I go into my Y view and use my scroll mouse, I can see that it's still up in the air, and click in here. So now I have manually placed my cursor at the origin of the world, but there's a much better way of doing that, and that is by pressing Shift S, because this one will enable you to place your cursor wherever you need. See, you can place it on the world origin, which is there, or you can place it on the selected object. Happens to be this. Actually, I had more. I have 2 objects selected, and that's why the cursor now falls in the mean point in the axis between these 2 origins. See, that is the center of that. But if I only have one single object selected, change my tool, and then snap my cursor to selected, the 3D cursor goes inside this object into the object origin of this object. And the same if I click here, Shift S, cursor to selected, and it's inside the cube now. You can also snap the selection to the grid, which will snap your selected object into the nearest grid. Now it's on top of that. Or you can snap your cursor to the grid. Now we are right on top of this cursor grid line here. Or you can snap your cursor to the selection to the cursor. So if I place my cursor here and then select this cube or the sphere, and Shift S selection to cursor, you will see that the ball will snap to where I had my cursor. This is most useful, and we will be discussing this in detail later. The next three buttons here are the move button. Click on that, and you can move your object by moving along the axis or by dragging the ball and move it in all three axes. I strongly recommend against using this method because you have no clue where your object is going to fall. See, it's right there now, but if I move it from the ball over there, it's there, and then I can move it freely up to here or down to here, and I have no idea where it's going to fall to be precise. So for precise movements, always use your arrow keys. The same applies to your rotation. This is like a trackball type of rotation on this axis or on this axis or this axis. But it's much safer. I'll just go a couple of times, Shift S. Okay. Much safer is always to say, instead of using this tool, I much prefer staying in the selection tool and using the quick key R, rotate and Z, and now it will rotate along the Z axis, or rotate and Y. It will rotate on the Y axis when I move the mouse, or rotate on the X axis and it will rotate on that axis. It's much more easy to stay on top of what you want to do if you use the axis. So RZ or RZ will rotate on the Z axis. This is the safest way to do it. The next button here is scale. The quick key is S. And again, you have scale on the Y axis, scale on the X axis, and scale on the Z axis. It's possible, by the way, to bypass, to go through your origin. See, it's like now it's like a round thing this way, but if I go flatter and flatter, let me view from the Y, flatter and flatter and flatter, it will actually go through your 0 point and then become like puffy again. But now it's rotated 180 degrees because we went across the origin. So this sometimes you have to bear this in mind when you want to do scales. And again, scale X will do this, scale Y will do this, and scale Z will do this. And I again strongly recommend that you use the axis and learn the keys. Like move is actually G for grab, because the M key is reserved for something else. And scale is S, and R is rotate. There's also this one here. This is called transform, and this allows you to do all three at once using this gizmo here. It's called the gizmo, and I have no clue why this is here because it's totally useless. Trying to do all three at once is never going to give you what you need to do. Trust me. The next one is annotation, where you can make annotations here. You can draw on the screen and it actually becomes an object. See? And it is aligned to the view wherever you happen to be viewing your object from. This is like the plane on which it's going to write. I have to say I haven't used annotations that much because I've never had the need for that. So I'll just Control Z my way out of this. The next one, this one here, is measure, and it can be used for measuring distances. If I go in here and I click on one of the vertices and I snap the cursor to that vertex, and then I go in here and I can measure how far this ball is from the cube. But again, because I'm not doing it by the axis, it's not going to be very accurate. This is actually more useful if are in edit mode, because then you can see the points between which you are measuring. So I'll just quickly do this, and then I will snap. Oops, I will just start from here and measure. That's the wrong tool. That's the annotation tool. And if I press down on control, it will snap to whatever I'm closest, and then drag, and it will snap to the other one. So you can see that the length of the edge is 0.91, and it's also here 0.91 because this is a cube. But if I scale this on the x-axis, and then I do the same measurement again with the control down, it's going to be 1.8. So it has almost like doubled. So this is how you use the measurement tool. And over here we have a quick way of adding a couple of basic objects like a cube, a cone, cylinder, or UV sphere or icosphere. And this will enable you to do it interactively so that you can see what happens. But I must say I haven't used that so much. It's not very useful in my opinion. Let me get a new file, and as remember, there is nothing in my world, but I will add a cube, and then I will show what happens when you go into edit mode. See the tool shelf here on the left, and when I click into edit mode, you can see it has the same thing, select, but now the selections are only going to happen inside my cube. I can select parts inside my cube by taking the face tool. I can pick any of the faces. Here by taking the edge tool, I can take edges, and with the shift key I can select multiple edges. And now whatever I do will apply to those selected parts only. If I do this and say scale on the z-axis, not z-axis, shift z, then it's going to do the x and the y. And I need to explain something about the vertices, by the way. If I have, I'll just delete this cube because I need to explain something to you now. Delete. If I go in here and I say add a single vertex, which is actually easier to place by saying a plane, then I pick the three of the other vertices away, 1, 2, and 3. All I have left is this single vertex in here. It is a point in space. It doesn't have anything else except a location. But if I extrude that single vertex with the E key along the x-axis for 2 units, I will actually have an edge which consists of 2 vertices. So extrude, x-axis, and 2 units, and enter. And now you can see that I have an edge. If I now say E for extrude, Y for the axis, and 2 units, and enter, I will have the same plane which I had before I deleted the 3 vertices. And now if I pick the whole face and I say extrude, it's going to understand that I want to extrude in the Z direction, and I hit the 2, I'm going to get my default cube, but it was created from a single vertex. And this is rather interesting actually, because to create anything, all you need is a single vertex. And now let's look at what happens when we do a edit mode change. Now inside our tool shelf we have different buttons. Here we have extrude region, and that means that if I have, Let's go into edit mode and into vertex mode. And let me add a couple of loop rings like so, and a couple of loop rings like so. Now, if I have this region selected and I click on this and I pull on this, I can extrude it or push it in. It creates a second set of vertices for me, and I can move those very easily. I have to tell you something here now. If you click on extrude and then you decide to abandon the extrusion by right-clicking or pressing ESC, what happens is that you still have created 4 more vertices in here. See, this is an extra vertex that you created when you pressed E. If you do not want that to happen, that means that you need to first cancel the extrusion, but then also cancel the selection of the extrusion tool, which already creates the extra vertices for you. Or you need to do this. You have to select everything. Now all the vertices are selected, including the extra 4 that were created here, 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 and here. And now when you press the M key, it will merge the vertices together. So when I say merge and by distance, the last option here, now there is no longer an extra vertex. There's only 4 because I didn't duplicate the vertices. So this is very important. It's actually, I'll explain another thing while I'm here. If I duplicate this cube by pressing Shift D and hit Enter, now I actually have 2 cubes in the same place. And in sometimes this can be very problematic. If I add 2 more cubes, Shift A and cube, and in the very same place, Shift A, another cube. These are now 2 different parts, but if I say Ctrl J, I now have an exact set of duplicates in the exact same locations. And it is sometimes problematic. For example, if you try to 3D print something that has duplicate vertices, then the printing software is not going to be able to print that because you have the duplicate vertices in there. So be very careful not to let your objects get duplicate vertices by extrusion or by duplication by hitting the Shift D key and getting duplicate sets of vertices in your object. They may be problematic for you later. But to go back to the previous example, I don't want to do that. I just delete that and add a cube instead. Here we go. So into edit mode. The next one here is inset faces, and inset faces is used for getting a new face inside your existing face. And this is the way the inset faces works. You go into edit mode, you go into face select mode, you select a face, and then you click on the insert faces button and move inside the circle and push with your mouse to get another face. Then you can extrude and do another insert face and extrude to another insert face. So this is by far the fastest way of getting new geometry into your mesh, and it will always be perfect. You will not be adding any extra vertices if you don't need to. The next button here is bevel, and to use bevel, you can do it like this. First you extrude another face. And then when you click on the bevel button, you get this needle. And when you pull the needle, it will give you an extra set of vertices. And with this one, you can add segments to your bevel. So you can get a nice rounded edge to your object. So this is, by the way, every time you do something, just accept this. And then when you look at this and you do like an extrusion, like so, you can always see down here that there will be settings that are related to whatever you now just did. So now that I have extruded that, and if I want to do an inset, and I do an inset over here, I have extra settings that apply to what I now just did. And if I extrude that and I go to bevel, and I do a bevel, I have to move it down a little, do a bevel like so. These will change to affect my current operation, and then I can just hit enter or click outside the object to accept. And that's a nice and easy way to get more geometry out of your current geometry. A loop cut means that you will create a loop ring inside your object. You can have it like horizontally or you can have it vertically. And you can see how there's the yellow ring appears, and it merely points to where your loop ring is going to happen. If you want to make this split into two parts or add it with a loop ring, you can point to that and then use your mouse, click once, and then you can add more of them into your object like so. And you can hit enter to get out of it. And now you can see that you can actually get quite a lot of different things by adding loop rings into it. So this is a very useful tool for many of your purposes. The next one is a knife, which will let you cut through an edge. Let me click on the knife and I will start here and I will cut, and you will see that there's an extra vertex appears whenever I cross an edge like so. And a right click will stop that, and then an enter will also stop that. And now I can use the freshly made edges to do something, whatever it is that I need to do. Like take an edge, take a face and extrude in a place that there wasn't any vertices before. The next one is called poly build, and this is rather complex. I'm not quite sure actually what you use this for. I haven't used this. And the next one is spin, which will extrude the selected vertices in a circle around the cursor in the indicated viewport. Let's try this one. Click on that and rotate. Yeah, nice. So you can get that sort of rotation on your object. Again, I'm hard pressed to think of a nice use for this, but then again, I'm not very much into the high end of modeling. This is going to make flatten your vertices. So if you just go into vertex edit mode and select this area here, and then use this tool You can make it go smaller or larger around the viewpoint. To illustrate the use of the edge slide, it's easier to go back to a basic cube. Use Shift R to edit Control R to give you an edge loop. And then when you have this edge slide button selected, you can grab this pin and push to see your edge move along the other edges. And when you let go, it will stop moving and enter will lock it into place. Also, if you select just one edge, you can still slide it like so. And if you take this edge in here, you can slide it along the normals like so. So sometimes this is rather useful. The next button here, the shrink or fatten, means that if you pick a few vertices, such as these, and you click on this, you can make them grow bigger or smaller along the normals that you are moving along. And the normals are actually imaginary arrows that are perpendicular to the face that you are working on. So if you take this face in here and you use the shrink fatten, it will happen along this yellow needle that is pointing perpendicular to the face that you have selected. The next button here is a shear, and the shear will shear the selected items along the given axis. So you have X and you have Y and you have Z, and shear will twist your object along the axis that you select. Again, this is not one of the tools that I would be using all the time, but it may sometimes be handy to use to make your meshes grow bigger and smaller along your areas. And the last one is called rip region, and this will basically take your selected face and rip it off the actual part. I personally don't like to use this tool for ripping a region. I much prefer using the rip tool, which I will demonstrate now. So to illustrate this, I returned to the basic cube, and let's say that you wanted to open this box. You could do it by going into edit mode, selecting the edge mode, selecting the edge that you want to move, and then picking the rip region button, and then going inside the yellow yellow circle, and just drawing up on the Y axis or on the Z axis. It would sort of open the lid for you. Of course, as you can see, it didn't really open the lid. It actually made it longer, but it enabled me to create a box that can be opened. For a more general use of the RIP tool, I personally rather like selecting an area that I want to rip, and then I press the P key, which is for separation, and click on selection, and this will make it into a different part of the object. So now I have two objects actually. I have this object, which is the lid, and I have the other box in here. So they are cube and cube 0, 0, 1. Right, this concludes the use of the toolbar, the T tool shelf actually, and we will be going forward into something else in the next video.